Hi, everyone. I'm just going to ask you to mute yourselves. Great. To begin, let us acknowledge Queens is situated on the traditional Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee territory. We're grateful to be able to live, learn, and play here on these lands. Thank you all for attending the final session of the month, the Law School 101 panel. We'll have a Q&A session at the end of the panel, so please feel free to send in your questions using the chat. The host for the panel tonight is Tharzia Ganeshmurthy, a 2L student in our JD program. Thar, I'm going to pass over to you to introduce yourself and the rest of the panel.
Thank you, Maggie. Yes, so nice to see all of you here today, even if it is virtually. As Maggie was saying, my name is Tharshika. I go by Thar, and I'm a second-year law student here at Queen's Law. So our panel here today, we have a number of attendees who have learned about a variety of elements that make up our very unique JD program. So with this panel, we aim to bring all of these different pieces together from the viewpoints of a current student, faculty member, as well as a recent graduate. And they will discuss the pathways students may take to achieve their goals here at Queen's. And so with that brief introduction, I can pass it off to each of the panelists who will provide a introduction to themselves. So I guess I'll first start off with maybe Zach.
Sure, of course. So hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming today. I'm really excited to speak with you all. So my name's Zach, and I'm currently a 3L student here at Queen's Law. I started in the pre-COVID days back in September 2019. So it's kind of surreal now that it's kind of I'm in my last year. Before studying at Queen's, I did my undergraduate at McMaster University in Hamilton, where I did legal philosophy and economics. And then at Queen's, I've been involved in the student community in a bunch of different ways. One of my big involvements was with the Queen's Family Law Clinic, where I was a volunteer caseworker in first year, and then a student credit worker in second year, and then a clinic mentor in my third year this year. And in addition to that, I've also been a tutor through the Queen's peer tutoring program. That's like a free academic service that the faculty offers to students where upper years help them with their courses. And in addition to that, I've also been involved in a couple of clubs. I was involved in the Policy and Law Club here at Queen's, as well as the Children and Youth Law Club. And then I was also an orientation coordinator a couple years ago as well, where I worked on the orientation programming. So that's a little bit about me and my involvements at Queen's so far. And yeah, would definitely be happy to take any questions on those afterwards.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Zach. And then I'll pass it right along to Kara for her introduction there.
Thank you, Thar. Hi, my name is Kara Arsenault. I am a current 1L student, so a couple years behind Zach. I've been doing the Queen's Law Journal. I'm an executive on the Queen's Family Law Club, so you guys are going to get a bunch of that from us tonight, apparently. I'm also excited to say that I got into the Queen's Family Law Clinic for next year, so we'll be carrying along that torch. I did my undergraduate in psychology. I did a lot of research, so that's kind of my background and where I'm coming from to law school. I didn't have any legal experience, whether study or worked before this, but I think I've been doing pretty good. And yeah, that's me.
Great, thank you. And then I'll have Nigel.
Awesome, thanks, Dara. Hi, everyone. My name is Nigel Masenda. I'm a recent grad, Law 20. We're actually the first class to not have an actual graduation during the COVID era, so I'm part of that group. I did my undergrad at Brock University in political science, and then I summered and articled at Stikeman Elliott, so it's a full-service law firm at the Toronto office. And then shortly after being hired back, a unique opportunity came up to lateral down to the States, and now I'm currently a corporate associate at Greenberg Traurig at their LA office. Yeah, I'm super excited to get to know some of you as well. And yeah, that's a bit about me.
Great, thank you. And last but not least, Professor Gray.
Maybe least. So I'm Professor Colin Gray. I actually started at Queen's when Zach started 3 years ago. So I also feel like, I don't know, Queen's is still very fresh to me, and I'm still looking at it with fresh eyes. So at Queen's, I teach public law, I teach constitutional law, including CARA in constitutional and public law. I also teach admin law, and I think I've had you as Nigel in admin. Yeah. So I'm not really sure what else to say. It's an exciting place to be. I've had a great time teaching, and I guess we'll just speak a little bit more about that as we go along.
Perfect. Thank you all. So we can get started with some of the questions that we already have prepared, and we'll start off easy for all of the panelists. What is your favorite thing about living in Kingston? And you can just, whoever wants to go first.
I'll go. Okay, so when I remember sitting in this very panel last year, when it was all part of the same welcome day, and one of the things that I was curious about, because I was coming from doing my undergrad in Toronto, I was worried, okay, how is life going to compare to like Toronto? And honestly, I love it here. I wasn't sure if I was going to, but just probably my favorite thing would be when you want to spend time with your friends. It doesn't have to be this thing where you have to plan a week or a day around. You can literally just say, hey, you live 5 minutes away from me. Let's do something really quick. And it's the easiest thing in the world to do. And I think it's also part of probably why we have such a strong community here at Queen's. It's so easy to do things with people, and everyone here seems to be really happy to jump on board with those things. Like I had to go to the dollar store after class yesterday. I mentioned it, and I had 3 friends volunteer to go with me, and it was great. So yeah, it's really easy to be social. And in law school, doesn't matter who you are coming in, social will become a really big part of your life.
Yeah, 100%. Just kind of like branching off of that, like one of my favorite things is when I immediately got there, I was fearful for the winter just because of like everything that I'd heard. But then you quickly realize that like, even if you have a car, you never want to use it because everything in Kingston is just so consolidated and close together that you often find times that you're just walking everywhere. And like, it's not uncommon, if anything, it's highly likely that you'll be walking to campus and you'll run into someone that you know, and then you quickly walk together. And I think what's really cool, a little bit unique to some of the other law schools, is the way in which Kingston and Queens in particular are situated on campus. The law school is its own building, but it's not segregated from the rest of the campus. So you still get that Queens culture and that Queens feel, because in order to get to the law school, you have to pass through some of the other like undergraduate and graduate programs. So it's nice because like you're part of the Queens community, but then you're also a part of the independent law school community. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. Like you kind of get to mesh into it. And what's really fun is like all of the like homecoming or like social like Queens events, you're also part of that just by proximity. And then people will slowly start to ask you questions. You're wearing like your Queen Law clothing. And like, oh, I'm interested in going to law school. Do you have any tidbits of advice for me? And like, I think Queens or Kingston does a really good job of really kind of integrating you into the Queens and Kingston community. Like, you're independent from it because you are a law student, but then you're also a huge part and component of it because people will just naturally kind of come up to you and gravitate towards you. So I mean, that was one of my favorite things, is just how immersed you really become in both the Queens and the Kingston community immediately, and just the accessibility and not needing a car for anything.
My undergraduate thesis, which
Great. I'm not sure if Zach and or Professor Gray want to chime in there.
So I can add something, and by the way, please call me Colin. So I would actually say that one of the best things about living in Kingston is that it's close to 3 other cities that you can get to pretty easily on the train. So I myself actually commute into Kingston from Toronto every week. And I can tell you that I'm not alone. There are a lot of students and faculty who go back and forth, not just to Toronto, but to Ottawa or Montreal. And so Kingston ends up being this sort of focal point that sort of brings in people from other cities. And so you end up with this community that kind of combines the best of both worlds. It has a lot of people who live here, whose lives are integrated with each other, like Cara and Nigel just described, but it also brings in these people who, I don't know, otherwise you wouldn't see. So that's something that I would say. And I would actually say that even though Nigel was just talking about not getting in a car and how great that is, the outdoors are so accessible from here. And so you can get in a car and you can drive half an hour and you can be hiking sort of in a beautiful sort of woods, or the lake is is very close to the campus. And you can actually just sort of take a ferry across to Wolf Island and sort of go walking through Wolf Island. So Kingston is a small city. The outdoors are really accessible, but also other cities are really accessible too.
Yeah, and I would just like to agree with everything that all three of the other panelists said so far. I think the proximity, both in terms of other cities, to other people in the Queen's community, but especially like your peers and professors, that proximity really lends well to the kind of social community and spirit of the school that I've really enjoyed. And then following up on Professor Gray's note about the nature aspect too, I love being able to just walk out of the law building like 10 minutes down the road, not even, and be at the lakefront and be able to just kind of walk along there and take a break. So all of those things, definitely Kingston has exceeded my expectations as a city to live in, for sure.
Yeah, I think I would echo everything the panelists have said, but I just want to add, I also did my undergrad at Queen's. So this is my 6th year in Kingston, and I'm still to date finding new restaurants to try here, and whether that be, downtown Kingston or even outside of Kingston. So if you're a foodie like me, there's a lot to try here, if that's a plus point or anything for any of you. Okay, so thank you. So with that, our next question is geared towards the law students. So one of the most common questions we get from prospective students is what the transition is like from an undergraduate program into law school. And this is especially if some students are coming in with some knowledge while others are not. So can you comment on your experience so far at Queen's Law? And maybe we will start off with Zach.
Of course, yeah. So I did, like I said previously, my undergrad was in philosophy and economics. So especially in the philosophy classes, there was a lot of discussion. It was very discussion oriented. But even still, I did find one of the biggest changes in law school was mostly with the pedagogical approach of the professors in class. And eventually, it was initially a big change, but I ended up really enjoying it, actually. So I found like in first year, a lot of my professors did use kind of Socratic method where they were asking questions. And so the big change there was that you want to come to class knowing a little bit more than you might have in your undergraduate. You could sometimes get away with not doing the readings and that before class as much, but in law school, sometimes since so much of that learning happens through discussion with your peers in class, that was a big change for me, is making sure that I was taking the time to prepare a little bit more before class than I would have otherwise. But with that said, all those different types of changes that come in law school, there were a lot of resources that helped as well in that adjustment. So I had mentioned the tutoring program before that I was a part of, and that was something that helped me a lot in my first year, being able to talk to an upper year before the first public law exam and see how they could help with that and best methods for studying and preparing. And then also, again, when you live so close to all your peers too, being able to have those late night study groups and talking to each other, that really helped too. So the transition, it is a transition and it is different. It's a different way of engaging with the material, engaging with your peers. But at the end, I think that it ends up being really effective and a really enjoyable way of learning things. So that's kind of my comment on the transition.
Great, thank you, Zach. And then I'll pass it over to Cara for hers.
I would agree with everything that Zach just said. I would add, I guess, one tiny point of clarification for like something that I think may be different between our experiences. So my teachers or professors, sorry, such as Colin, I'm gonna try Colin now, unless you tell me to call you Professor Grace. So anyway, sorry. So we have really nice professors here at Queen's. They're all very friendly and it's pretty awesome. I'm getting drinks with one of them after exams are over. Like, we've got cool professors. Anyway, so while my professors have definitely taught a lot through class discussion and facilitating that and kind of trying to pull things out of you and push you to think critically and be able to say, okay, so the judge said this, but what do we actually think about that? Was that right? Could we do better? I haven't had any professors use true Socratic method. So I haven't had any cold calling professors. I have one professor where what she does is she has panels and you know in advance if you're going to be one of the people on panel and she'll call on you and she calls it warm calling and it's actually pretty cool because you have amazing, perfect, immaculate notes for that particular day. I would also say, so I didn't have any experience coming in and I've got some friends where they were already working in legal clinics before getting here. So I've definitely seen what their journey has been like versus my own journey. And I think that's one of the reasons that I've actually been really glad that I'm here is that there's such a community vibe, for lack of a more articulate word, that, you know, me and my friends, we're not coming at each other from a competitive aspect. We're not, you know, kind of hoarding our secret best notes. We're genuinely there to help each other and to kind of help everyone in our little group do as well as possible. And even within our small section, people are constantly posting notes and we'll say, hey, you know, I missed that. Does anyone have the notes? And they'll get like 3 people sending them notes. And like study groups have been essential. So I like that I have friends where we all did different undergraduate backgrounds because you all bring different perspectives to whatever you're looking at. And I think that's really valuable insight. And, you know, you're probably going to spend your exam period crowded around someone's coffee table, just studying in. So those different perspectives help keep things fresh. So don't feel bad if you're not coming from poli-sci or you don't have lawyers in your family. There's going to be a moment where your background is an advantage and is an asset to somebody else and to yourself. So don't worry about that. You'll be fine.
Great, that's some good advice. I'm not sure if Nigel or Colin want to add anything.
I would just say that I don't think any discipline gives you much of an advantage over any other discipline in terms of the basic skill, which is that you need to do well in law school, and that's thinking, right? Everybody can think, and you may have slightly different styles of thinking, but I don't think that there's any particular discipline really privileges you over other groups.
And I would just quickly chime in with respect to further fleshing out the Socratic method discussion in saying that I know for some people like that is a genuine source of fear and cause for concern. And like some of my peers, they were a little bit worried about that. And you can feel quite comfortable in knowing that you can reach out to professors if they do kind of let you know early on that that's their preferred approach, and they'll understand. Like they've been in our shoes, they've been in our positions, they understand that different people have different sensitivities, and they won't put you on the spot. Like the rest of your peers won't know, but they'll definitely work around that to accommodate you. Like, so it's not going to be a situation where you're thinking, oh my goodness, like, I don't want to go to this school or I don't want to take that class because I don't want to get cold called on. They understand the position that, you know, you're placed in where, you know, you're not going to know a lot of this material, and like the expectation isn't necessarily for you to know the correct answer, but I think it's just a different way of teaching. But if you do relay those concerns to them, like they're happy to accommodate and like happy to work with you to find like a viable solution. So that shouldn't be something that, you know, is a source of concern for you when you hear that Socratic method. It's just, you know, an approach that they use.
Great. I think all of the panelists covered everything, but I just wanted to echo what Kara was saying earlier. When I was coming into law school, like being first generation, no lawyers in my family, like I was very unsure what to expect. But the community at Queen's Law is like none other. The upper years were, you know, like outlines came through. They were like, whatever you need help with, they were willing to interview you, like do practice interviews with you. So that is a great resource for you if you do choose Queen's Law, and I think something very unique to this campus. Okay, so the next question is for Nigel. So as a recent grad, can you chat a little bit about your experience at Queen's Law and your career path taken? A question that comes up often is whether a student has to know exactly what type of law they want to pursue when they start law school.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a great question. And I think it's funny enough, like my background and what I presently do now is a great example of the fact that like, no, you don't need to know what it is that you want to do. And the reason why I send the perfect example for that is I primarily do blockchain work and crypto. So going into law school, like that didn't exist. That wasn't a thing. So if I would have went in under the guise of saying, okay, I want to do this particular type of work, it wouldn't have panned out for me. And honestly, I didn't even realize that this is what I wanted to do until about 8-9 months ago. So even after I summarized an article at Stikeman, like I still wasn't really sure what it is that I wanted to do. Also really kind of say like, you don't need to know immediately what it is that you want to do. And I think if anything, you're doing yourself a disservice if you go into it believing that you want to practice a particular type of law, because you haven't really engaged with the material. You haven't really dabbled with it or kind of tackled it. And I think even from an academic standpoint, you won't really know what it is that you want to do until you've actually gotten that legitimate exposure to it. And this, I think, where Queens does a great job is the offering of the clinics. Like there's a broad array and range of different types of clinics that you can get exposure to. And I think that's when you really can kind of narrow down the scope a little bit and say, oh, okay, like this is an area that I'm interested in. I have some friends who they came in super keen on doing, family law, and then, they had this plan, they did a clinic, and they quickly realized, you know what, maybe that's not for me. Even with the courses, they thought that that's what they wanted to do, but when they actually got exposure to that work, they realized, okay, maybe this isn't what I want to do. Again, like as Professor Gray and others echoed earlier, like you don't need to have a particular background coming in. It's not going to give you a leg up, and it's not really going to give you exposure or perspective to a practice area that you can kind of carry forward and apply. But I think really coming in with an open mind is probably the best approach that you can take, just because you don't know what it is that you'll like. And as fluid as the markets and kind of society are, there could be something new that comes on the horizon that didn't exist when you went to law school that you find is actually like your perfect fit and your perfect niche. Because like for me, going even summarizing and articling, the work was fine, but I felt as though there was always kind of a bit of a gap. And then once I actually got to do the blockchain stuff, now I'm just like, oh, this is amazing. I can stay in like big corporate law forever if this is what I'm doing, because I genuinely enjoy the work. And had I gone in thinking I'm just going to do private equity M&A, I probably wouldn't be here right now. I'd be laterally out doing something completely different. So I think the most important thing is to go in with an open mind. Like it's fine if you have your preferences and say, okay, I think I would like this, but I wouldn't close any doors prematurely until you've actually had a chance and opportunity to really kind of deal and dabble with that particular practice area. And I think a nice preliminary way of doing that is reaching out to upper years who are maybe working at firms you'd be interested in, or also speaking with professors. Because a lot of them, including Professor Gray, have previous practice experience. So they didn't just go in as an academic, but they've actually are either currently practicing or formerly were practicing. So they can probably give you further insight into it, as well as doing the clinic. So I think just coming with an open mind is probably the best approach that you can take, because again, you're not doing yourself any services by going in there saying you just want to do one thing, because you're just omitting the vast opportunities. And I don't know, I look at school as like a cool, unique chance where you can take 5 different courses in completely different subject areas and kind of figure out what it is that you want to do. And if you can do that risk-free, then why wouldn't you do it? Because I think it's the best course you can take.
Okay, that's perfect. And a perfect segue, because I'm actually going to ask Colin to add in a little bit about how that might change throughout, someone's first few years of practice.
How their practice might change? Is that the question?
Or like their interest in certain areas of law, how that might change throughout their first few years of practice.
Oh, so I mean, actually, I think Nigel might be able to speak to this a little bit more, and in some ways he has. I mean, but my experience working when I worked at law firms, and I also worked in the government, is that your career will change and develop sort of as you get exposed to different kinds of files, different kinds of clients, right, Nigel? And and so I don't know. So even once you sort of proceed to sort of law firms or smaller practices or government, you will end up getting a variety of work, and you'll probably most likely be able to gravitate towards whatever work is most interests you. So I don't know if that answers your question, Tar.
No, that's perfect. I'm actually going to stay with you for the next question as well. So the next question we have is, how has the profession of law changed in the past 5 years? And what do you predict will happen in the next 5 to 10 years?
So I did this panel last year, and I convened a panel of my friends to try to help me answer this question. And their answers are always, so one of the ways that the practice of law has changed a lot is just the increasing ways in which technology is sort of integrated into legal practice. And so this is happening all the time. It's happening in new and exciting ways, in ways that we can't even predict, right? And so one thing that I would say is that that means that you need to be thinking even more than sort of you were before about what you as like the human lawyer brings to the practice of law. And I think that what that is critical thinking, right? So the practice of law, because of sort of the increasing involvement of technology in the actual work that you do, is actually sort of emphasizing an important human skill, which is sort of being able to think and think critically. And then the other thing is, and I don't know if Nigel, like if this is something that'll ring true for you, but there's sort of an increasing demand, apparently, of specialization. So clients are increasingly demanding specialization among lawyers, and that's because clients are ever more focused on legal risk and addressing legal risk. And the best way to address legal risk is to find lawyers who are really specialized in whatever area you're interested in. So one of the things that you might expect to happen to you as you sort of move past law school and into your career is to find yourself increasingly specialized. So those were two big changes.
Okay, perfect. I'm not sure if any of the other panelists want to add in anything there.
Yeah, I guess I'll just tack on to what Professor Gray said. And I heard something you're already seeing that now, and just to kind of flesh out something that he mentioned before with respect to legal risks, clients now are much more comfortable staffing their files or paying for legal services in a much more robust way than before. Oftentimes we were looked at more as like a cost-saving measure, but now clients are quite comfortable staffing 7, 8, 9 lawyers on a file as opposed to 3 to 4, just because the risk tolerance is reduced and the scope of risk has increased dramatically. Something that's really cool and interesting, and I think I made me think of when Professor Gray was speaking, is that you as a human lawyer are going to be faced with challenges that occur in the metaverse. Because we're seeing recent examples of people being, I guess, assaulted and attacked in the metaverse. And the fundamental question was, well, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with a crime that's committed in a different space that's not between two individuals who are physically present? And at some point in time, that's going to be regulated. It's going to be dealt with. And you as a human lawyer, you're going to have to figure out how to combat that, how to challenge that. So I think it's really interesting just to see how rapid the space is changing from a fundamental and ideological perspective, but then also practically when the inverse is now Facebook, or I guess Meta, is going to be much more vigilant and diligent with respect to how they staff, because now when they enter new spaces, there's more risks involved for that. So now you are in fact going to be someone who's going to be specializing in something much more narrow and much more niche. Because even within blockchain, I do very narrow in scope work, and I don't do the entirety of the industry, even though the practice itself is rather broad, or sorry, rather niche. Even within that niche area, what I do is a very lean and linear vein. So I think that's what we'll really kind of start to see in the practice, particularly at the larger firms. Even at the smaller firms, is just an increased preference for specialization and people who do one thing or two things exceptionally well, and you become the go-to. And companies, clients are much more comfortable paying for that added layer of insulation and security just because the scope of the risk is just increasing dramatically as they start to enter new areas and avenues and markets.
The only thing I'd add to that, sorry, Thar, is also there's this demand for apparently this demand for specialization also extends to in-house counsel, right? So even if you're not at a big firm or even a small firm, but you're working sort of within a corporation as in-house counsel, sort of even internally, sort of lawyers are beginning to specialize more and more in different aspects of sort of the legal practice that has to go on within firms.
This is great. I'm also learning a lot by being at this panel. This is wonderful. Colin, just to build on this last question there, can you speak to a little bit about what Queen's Law is doing to better equip their students for this change in the law over the last couple of years?
So I was thinking about this before the panel, and I think there are really two things to highlight about, or two kinds of things that are going on at Queen's Law that are really exciting if you're focused on these kinds of changes. One is that there are courses and programs like the Conflict Analytics Lab, which are really focused on sort of the increasing integration of technology into the law. So the Conflict Analytics Lab is a lab in which students sort of can take part in experiential learning with respect to how do you work with technology and the law. It's a very popular course, and it really gives students a very rich experience. The other thing that I think is really exciting and interesting that's happening at Queen's is there have been a lot of faculty hired that are really focused on just sort of interesting legal theoretical questions. So this isn't so much focused on firm jobs, but there's a lot of interest in legal theory and legal philosophy at the law school. I would say there's about 10 faculty members who sort of focus on that kind of scholarship specifically. And what's interesting about that and the sort of practical benefit of that for students is that when you enter the classroom with these professors, they are really focused on teaching you how to think about the problems in front of you. And that's going to equip you to specialize. It's going to equip you to adapt as your career inevitably changes as you go through it.
Perfect, thank you. So our next question will be for all of the panelists. So what do you think was your biggest misconception about law school? And maybe we'll start with Nigel.
No, that's a great question. I think my biggest misconception about law school was I thought going into it, you would just be grinding, studying away, and doing nothing else, when that's not the case at all. And I think what's really cool about Queen's, and I speak to some of my colleagues that went to other law schools, is Queen's does a great job of being kind of bifurcated, where there's a high bar for academic excellence, but then it's also exceptionally collegial. So I find myself oftentimes being tested and challenging myself and taking calculated risks, but then I would always hedge those risks against what my peers thought. And I felt comfortable asking them questions and saying, hey, does this make sense? Like, is this approach, sound to you? Even if they said, no, like, I wouldn't go down that particular path, but I think the professor would be receptive to it. And then what I would do after that is, in fact, go to the professor and ask them, like, hey, does this make sense? And they would immediately tell me yes, or like, nah, you're kind of missing the mark there. But I think that's kind of cool about it, right? Like, it's not a situation where you're in there by yourself, just grinding away, not doing anything else, just in isolation. It's a highly collegial environment. And I think what's nice about that is the collegiality actually raises your bar for academic excellence, because you and your friends will be together studying, and you'll look at the time like, oh wow, we've been studying for a really long time, but it doesn't always feel like that, because what ends up happening is you have these small kind of group discussions, and then that quickly segues into, let's go get food. And then while you're eating, like, you're not consciously doing it, but you're kind of talking about the material, you're kind of thinking things through. And then you'll have group chats, and then one message, you'll be like, hey, let's go out tonight. And then immediately after that, I was like, hey, quick question on like today's lecture. Like, what was X, Y, and Z? So it's nice because it's just very organically interwoven into the fact that your law school, academic life is heavily intertwined with your kind of social scene and your social life. And that may sound like a bad thing, but I found it's actually quite complimentary when you have a good group of friends. Like when you have friends that you just click with, it's the best thing ever. And I found I still have my law school group chat with some of the guys, and I'll ask some questions about work now in the group chat. If it's more of a general corporate question, I'll ask someone in the group now and they'll always give me a response. And then immediately after is, hey, you see those NFL trades today? So it's just kind of nice because you just kind of float back and forth between kind of the academic excellence, but then also being collegial. And that's really what the practice of law is. We're professional services and it's all client-based. Whenever you're working and dealing with a client in whatever capacity it is, and you'll always have a client no matter what vein you're in, it's not just giving exceptional legal advice, exceptional legal services, but it's also how you frame it, how you deliver it. Like there's a human being on the other side somewhere. And at some point in time, you're going to have to run into them and you have to interact with them. And you're not just going to say, hi, this is the legal service that I'm going to give you. Like you're not going to have a genuine conversation with them. And you have to find that sweet balance of being able to float back and forth between just a casual conversation, but then also giving them that apt legal advice. And I think Queens does a really good job of kind of, organically teaching how to do that. Because when you finally get to work, that was just a very natural thing when a partner or an associate would say, hey, let's go for lunch. You can just talk to get to know you, but then you can subtly ask questions in there. You can subtly get feedback in there. And it's not really rigid. It just kind of naturally kind of flow back and forth in and out. And I found that I first really developed that skill set at Queens, at law school. And I thought going into it, it would just be really regimented where it's just school. And then if I do have friends, they're either going to be outside of law school or it's going to be just purely not talking about school at all. Whereas I find it's much more intertwined, interwoven. And again, it's not a bad thing. It's not as though law just consumes your life. It's a really great thing when it just organically can flow in and out, and you're never oh, we're talking about this too much, because you can quickly just turn it off as easy as you're able to turn it off. So I think that was the biggest misconception, is going in there thinking, I'm just going to be studying incessantly and not having a social life. When I think I probably had as much, if not more fun in law school than I did in undergrad, but I learned way more in law school than I did in undergrad.
Great, thank you. That's good perspective. I guess next we'll have Kara.
So I think my misconceptions were pretty similar to some of Nigel's, just that, I wouldn't have time for hobbies or for fun. This is when I've got to really focus in, study hard. I'll be honest. Before I got to my final year seminars in my undergrad, I was one of those people where I only needed to read the textbook once and I got good grades. That's also because I found the material interesting. And I did a lot of I still work in some research labs. So it's stuff that I find interesting. Anyways, misconceptions, it was going to be a lot of work, not very much fun. You try for the occasional weekend every other year. But I've got this ongoing thing with a group of friends called Friday Friend Day. It's super dorky in name and we love it, and that's part of the fun. And for a few hours every Friday night after studying, we're not allowed to talk about law because we like talking about it so much, but we also just want to expand our world beyond just law, as interesting as it is. I've actually recently picked up watercolor as a brand new hobby that I've never done before. If I felt like lowering all of your opinions of me, I'd show you this piece that I did that is horrible, but I'm kind of proud of it. But anyways, there's tons of time for hobbies and fun. I don't think I had this balance during the first month or the first month and a half of law school by any means. So when you guys start law school and you're thinking back to this conversation, if you do think back to this conversation, and you're like, oh my God, they said it was so fun, but I feel overwhelmed because it's the first week and there's all of these readings to do. That's fine. That's normal. Everyone has that. But there is a light on the other side and it's not very far in. You've just got to get through that first month or so. For some people, it took a little bit longer. Other people hit the ground running and I have this one friend and we're all a little grossed out by her because she was never once even a little bit behind in a single class for readings. She was just constantly on top of it and just breezing by. And we love that for her, but we're a little jealous for us. But yeah, so there's time for fun, but also don't expect it to happen the very second you start. There is a learning curve. But here you have a lot of people helping you out. You have your friends. And also the upper years, like, y'all are amazing. Anytime I've wanted to do something new or I've been struggling, I didn't realize that the upper years were going to be such a resource. I was expecting it to be more competitive, even after hearing all the stuff about Queen's community. But I've just had so many upper years who's like, oh yeah, I can help you with that. Oh yeah, you want me to read your resume for you? Yeah, no, let's do this. It's great. It's not easy all the time, but there's so many people here that want you to do well. And a lot of the time they're the people who you're competing with, but it's actually that good.
Thank you, Kara. Colin, if you want to speak to this question next, and then we'll have Zach.
I feel like I've been speaking a bit too much, but the one thing that I would add is that you might have the misconception. I think this just adds to things that Nigel and Kara have said. You might have the misconception that you are going to be sort of primarily learning by yourself, and that you're just going to be like a collection of individuals learning in class together. And I can speak to, so I teach Kara in public law and con law, and her class is just a group of people who are always asking questions, answering one another's questions. And when you enter the classroom, it's really just, I think, just sort of the ideal that you might have of what classroom learning is, right? It's just everyone learning together through a discussion, and through a conversation. So I guess what I think you'll discover pretty quickly when you get to law school is that you are going to be learning sort of in a community, not just outside the classroom, but in the classroom too.
And thank you, Colin. Zach?
Yeah, so I agree with everything that's already been said. Those were some of my biggest misconceptions coming in for sure. So one that I'll add though is with regards to extracurriculars, because I think that a lot of times coming into law school, and especially in that first year when you start to see different opportunities coming up, it's, oh, I need to be doing this, this, and this, or else, oh, I'm going to be so behind my peers, or I'm not going to be able to get a job, or I'm not going to be competitive, or I'm not going to have as much fun. And that's really not true. And there's a lot of great opportunities to get involved in school and that, but you don't have to overload yourself too much getting involved in too many things. I know there was in 1L there was a moot that I was really interested in doing, but I just had so much else going on at the time that I decided I can't do this, and I passed, and I was really kicking myself about it. But it ended up being for the best. I was able to take care of myself a little bit better, and I got to do a moot down the road in law school still too. So you don't have to feel like you need to do everything right away and really pile on yourself with that. It's okay to kind of pace it out and do what you can do and explore your interests in those things. And if you don't get that one EC that you really wanted to do, or that, it's really not the end of the world. There's always lots of opportunities, and yeah, you don't have to worry about that all too much.
Great. I think all the panelists kind of covered a lot of the misconceptions, but just one thing I would add, particular to my experience maybe, but kind of similar to what Nigel was saying earlier, I really thought law school was going to be, keep my head down, grinding, I'm head in the books always, but I think that a lot of my learning and things that I look back on are actually my experiential learning opportunities, like doing the prison law clinic this year, and then the labor and employment in first year. Those type of skills and practical hands-on experience you get can make up your law school experience just as much as, being in the classroom and learning in that way as well. So there are lots of ways to have a law school experience is what I've learned so far, but I'm only in 2L, so. Okay, so we'll go over to our last, second last question for all of the panelists. So what is one piece of practical advice you would give to someone starting law school? And this time we'll start with Zach.
Awesome, thanks. So I guess one piece of advice that I would have is to really take advantage of all of the great resources that the faculty has to offer. It really went a long way for me in making my law school experience the best. So in terms of, I've mentioned again the tutoring program in first year. I think that's a really great and unique resource that we have here. But another great one too is the career development office. So being able to talk to upper year peers and the guidance counselors here about different career opportunities. I was someone that had a lot of internal distress about what career path I was going to go down. I'm actually working at the same firm that Nigel is at now in Canada. So I've did like a bit of a swerve from family law into business and that too. And being able to really meet with a counselor regularly and talk about the different career options, as well as some of the upper year students that they had working in that office, really helped me find my path into the areas that I end up really enjoying the most. So that was one resource that was really helpful for me. But then also, like I was saying before too, is that you don't need to do everything in your first year as well. So make sure that you're taking time to relax and unwind, and set time aside to have both study time with your friends, but also some just relaxing hangout time with your friends too. So that would be my 2 pieces of practical advice, I guess.
Yeah, I second that. I think everyone should implement Friday Friend Day. I'll pass that over to Kara. Go ahead.
Okay, so really, Friday Friend Day, it's pretty awesome. I really recommend it. Okay, so pre-law school advice. You've probably heard this 1,000 times before. I heard it 1,000 times before I got here. I did not listen to it. I should have listened to it. For the summer, or however long you can before starting law school, please don't try and cram your head full of all of this legal information. I promise you, no matter how many readings you think you're doing, you're not helping yourself. The way that you study law school in law school is just, it's so different. And I don't mean that in a bad way or an intimidating way. It's just, it's different. And nothing you can really do independently unless you've got a law professor at home. Nothing you can do independently before getting here is going to help you, but it will make you tired, and it will make your brain want to do things other than law for a little bit, and just come in refreshed and rested. I was foolish, but I still did fine, which is tribute to just the great resources here. Which again, like totally seconding what Zach is saying, and that there's just phenomenal resources here. I'm really excited to get started in the clinics. The journal's been really fun. If there's ever an opportunity that you're interested in, or a resource that you're not sure about reaching out to, just go for it. Really, just go for it. Don't be intimidated. Like, an opportunity might sound like intimidating and prestigious, like a moot or something, like, oh my God, do I have advocacy skills? Just try. And you'll really surprise yourself consistently. And maybe you're super nervous, and maybe you haven't done well at it in the past. So talk to someone who has done well. Like, there's so many people ahead of and beside you who just want to see you do well and want to be part of that journey, and just try for things. I would also say be kind to yourself. You know, if you're going to be putting a lot of pressure on yourself to meet certain goals, but let those goals be flexible and have little goals along the way that are achievable, not just like, I want to get a job at, I don't know, like the Seven Sisters or something. And okay, great, but you need little things that you can actually achieve and check off on your way there, or else you're just constantly going to be striving towards this thing and you won't necessarily feel progress towards that. And I think self-care is a really important goal to just have as a continuous thing, because there's only one of you, and there will always be another case to read. And sometimes just taking an hour or two to just be human is the best thing you can do for your grades, for your career. So be kind to yourself, try things, spend time with friends, and for the love of God, don't try and be a legal genius before getting to law school.
Great, that's some beautiful advice. So I'll pass it over to Colin. It feels so weird to say Colin. I feel like I have the urge to say Professor Gray.
Right. Yeah. So my advice, I really just would echo everything, both what Zach and Kara have said. When I was about to start law school a long time ago, I called up the office at the law school that I was going to go to, and I asked, is there any reading I can do in advance? And I told them, I was really thinking of reading Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics and just making a list of different kinds of arguments that people might make so that I can use that to sort of understand the law. And they said, no, don't do that. That is like, just relax, and when you get here, you will learn. So I guess it's been the same advice for a long time, and it is good advice, because what Kara said is true, what Zach said is true. Once you get here, the learning style will be different. When I attended one of these panels in my first year of law school, I remember someone saying, it will sort of change your brain, and that will hurt a little, but there's nothing you can do in advance to really prepare for it other than be kind to yourself and relax. So.
Thank you. And then I'll pass that over to Nigel.
I think it's kind of corny and cliche, but just be yourself. And I think Zach might have heard the same speech too, but our former managing partner, Jeff Singer, on the first day of us being summer students, said to us, don't be what you think a lawyer should be yourself. And I think that trickles down to when you're coming to law school. Like when you get there, you'll see your peers and you'll immediately think, oh, wow, this person is doing so well. Like their learning style seems to be the preferred method. They're answering all the professor's questions in class. They just seem to be on the ball with it. I need to do what they're doing in order to succeed. So that doesn't mean, if you're someone who ordinarily studies a particular way and you study at home, don't all of a sudden start studying in the library just because you think that's what it takes to succeed. Like, don't change who you are to mold into what you think the ideal or the prototypical law student is. Because like Professor Gray said, like law school is going to hurt a little bit. It hurts a lot when you try to revamp who you are fundamentally to conform to someone else. And it'll never work. It'll never stick. Like you'll always just be on precarious ground. And I think what always gave me and some of my peers peace of mind is we were always comfortable in ourselves. We were always comfortable studying how we studied. We always sat in the back row and people would like try to say, oh, you guys are the back row boys. Like you guys are always sitting in the back. Like, are you guys paying attention? And it's like, whatever, it doesn't bother us, because we know we've always just been comfortable sitting, that's where we sat. So don't change who you are when you get to law school. Like, don't divorce yourself and be someone else and say, okay, I think this is what the prototypical law student looks like because this person seems to be doing really well. So I'm gonna adopt their philosophy, adopt their approach in order to succeed. And even just think about it from a practical standpoint, law firms or wherever you end up working when you graduate aren't looking for the same prototype of an individual. Like they're looking for a variety of perspectives because client bases are going to be varied. So you don't want to actually be the exact same as your peer. Otherwise, how can wherever you want to work distinguish you from someone else? Like, why would you really do that to yourself? Like your skill set and your strengths are what got you into Queens and what will get you in any law school. If it wasn't, then it would take 5 minutes to evaluate every candidate because you would just look at one singular mode of evaluation if everyone was the same. If everyone tried to be the same, it would be so easy to distinguish people. So I would say, like, just be yourself. Like, don't get caught up in what you think you need to look like, what you think you need to present like. Like, I wear earrings into the office. Like, no one cares. No one bats an eye. And like, some of my peers, they wear earrings outside of the office, but because they changed who they were in law school, they don't necessarily feel comfortable being who they are now because they've just associated law with a version of themselves. And I think that's how you kind of get into the whole imposter syndrome thing, because what you've done to succeed isn't who you are. So now you're thinking to yourself, like, well, what's the real me? Like, what does it take to succeed? But I think if you're always just yourself, you'll be able to succeed on your own merits. I think there's so much comfort in that. There's so much comfort in succeeding being yourself because it's so easy to just kind of dismiss any comments that will set you awry because law school can be stressful. So you'll sometimes hear comments that are unwarranted. And if you're comfortable in yourself, it's really easy to dismiss them because you're saying, oh, that's not gonna bother me. But if you're not, like, that's when you kind of run into challenges. And I don't know anyone who's really done poorly by being themselves. But I know a lot of people who've struggled unnecessarily by trying to be someone they're not. So I'd honestly just say, like, just be yourself. So if you're someone who reads an outline once and is good to go, like, don't change that. I was one of my best friends and he's brilliant. Like he's able to do that. Whereas me, like, I love to iterate. And Professor Gray was on the receiving end of this where I would literally just send back and forth like 10, 15 emails, just making tweaks and like, does this make sense? Does this make sense? Because that's what I like to do. So whatever works for you, that's what you should do. Like, don't try and change to appease others or think that that's what's going to take to succeed, because what you did got you to Queens or any other school. So just keep doing that. Like there's literally no evidence to substantiate doing anything but that.
Okay, thank you to all of our panelists. That's definitely some good advice. I know we're approaching the 8 o'clock mark. So if any of the audience has a question, feel free to drop that in the chat or raise your hand. I'll just give it a couple seconds. And if not, then I do have one last question for the panelists. Okay, I think we have one. So question, any advice for housing going into first year? So maybe we'll have Kara and Zach answer that first.
Okay, he's not going, so I'm just jumping. We're of the time. Okay, so Kingston, I was coming from Toronto. I was expecting it to be like easy breezy. It's not easy breezy. It's also not impossible. I love the place I live. I'm paying like pennies compared to what I was paying in Toronto for. Okay, so I'll just tell y'all the situation so you have context. So including all of my utilities, my parking, I rent a 1,200 square foot 2-bedroom and this really cute 130-year-old house for $1,410 every month. And I split that with my partner who's at his desk over there. He's really nice. And like, I don't know, this is a bit ritzier of an apartment, probably just because like it's got that massive square footage, but I just got a really great deal. Oh, and I've got this really cute backyard too. It's like big, it's got a picnic table and a garden. It's nice. I like it. I'm happy. And I've got friends where, they found roommates through like Facebook groups. Queens can help you find people if you're really struggling. I know that there's a housing group for that. There's going to be a Facebook group for the class. You can find people on there if you want to live with other law students. There's a lot of opportunities. There's also there's just a lot of people looking for a roommate in Kingston because there's a lot of students and there's a lot of grad students. So even if you don't live with another law student, you don't necessarily have to worry, no offense to undergrads, you don't have to worry about living with an undergrad who's maybe living a slightly different lifestyle in their first year and they're kind of staying up real late and there's a lot of bottles that didn't contain water. There's a lot of options out there. And whether you don't want roommates or you do want roommates, there's a good range.
Yeah, go ahead, Zach. You want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think Kara highlighted the best points in terms of housing, and it's always good to hear an example. My house is also in the same kind of price range in that too. And one of the nice things is that everyone kind of lives in a pretty close proximity to campus. I think like far away at Queens is like a 15-minute walk, which is not the case at my old school for sure. And that, so it's really nice being close by to campus and everyone. So wherever you feel like you can, I believe Nigel might have mentioned it before too, like the grocery stores and that are all kind of along the downtown core near Princess too. So lots of good opportunity for housing in that area. And the Facebook group is, I think, where most students end up kind of connecting if you want a roommate situation. That's always a good place. You'll start to see posts kind of coming up after that first round of acceptances come in.
Can you try again?
Yeah, go ahead, Kara. I see your hand there.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. I remembered that I had something that I wanted to add if this came up. Okay, so to all of the people concerned about safety, Kingston's it's not just walkable in the sense that you can get to places, it's also walkable in the sense that I have not felt unsafe walking around the city, even if I've been walking back to a friend's house later at night. I typically walk with people, but I've walked by myself. Honestly, I have not even, okay, and this might be like a self-dig, but I haven't even been catcalled once in Kingston. And for me, that's it's a big safety note. I haven't been in a situation where I felt unsafe, where I felt like, oh my God, I need to get somewhere more populated. It's a safe place to live, and it's a safe place to just walk around and explore. And to me, that was a big thing I was worried about. And anyways, I'll stop.
Hey, that's perfect. Thank you all. I know we've passed our 8 o'clock and I see some questions in the chat there. But I will pass it over to Maggie, maybe for closing remarks. I don't want to keep everyone for too long.
Yes, apologies, everyone. We are going to end the panel at 8 just because it is in the evening. I don't want to hold our panelists for too long. But if you do have follow-up questions, you can always reach out to jd@queensu.ca and we can answer them or connect you with someone that can answer any of the questions that you have following this event. As I mentioned, this is the last event of the Welcome Day series. So that is your best way to stay connected with us. I just want to say thank you to all the panelists for all of your wonderful insights to being a JD student, how to prepare, how not to prepare, and what to expect after law school. So thank you all for joining us and taking the time out of your evenings and just providing the students with that information. Without further ado, I will end the session and wish everyone a good night. Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Night, everyone. Good luck.
Good luck, everybody.
Bye, everyone.